Question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the honourable member for Forest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to talk on this particular bill, and I'm very pleased to talk in support of small business. The so many small businesses that exist in my electorate, and particularly those who are newsagents. And we all know how much some or other form of customs in Australia, one of them is to have a punt. And that's what Australians call it, having a punt. And how often do you hear that, irrespective of whether it's perhaps on the battlefields of Gallipoli and the Western Front in World War I, the birdcage at Flemington, the mounting yard at Royal Randwick, or, as we see, the two-up that happens on Anzac Day at local RSLs right around Australia. And the colloquial phrase that says, bet on 2 lizards walking up a wall, can generally be applied right around this great country. And I know that the Sydney Opera House, for instance, was actually funded by a lottery. And that's going back many, many years. So our traditional lotteries, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and keno games are popular and a long-standing recreational gambling, as are recreational gambling products, and they are actually an important income stream for thousands and thousands of small businesses. And I will stand up for small business in this House every chance I get. So this includes, our newsagents, pharmacies, pubs, RSLs, and community clubs. They provide millions of dollars in tax revenue to every state and territory in Australia, and as we know, help to fund important community services and infrastructure, such as hospitals, schools, public transport and roads. And every time a customer buys a ticket in an official lottery draw, a percentage of the ticket price goes towards supporting community services, as well as an important part of the income stream for that small business news agency owner. The local newsagent, the local post office agency, small businesses run by great local people. And they support our local communities all over the country. Whenever a community group or organisation or sporting club, or even our service clubs that do such a great job, and our emergency services groups, where do they go in small communities when they need, whether it's a sponsorship or perhaps a prize for something they're doing, including perhaps a local raffle? They go to those local small businesses, just like our fantastic news agencies. And in places like Broadwater, News in Busselton, the Minninup Forum News Agency, the Donnybrook News Agency, the Capel News Agency, and, for instance, Dalyalup News and Lotteries, and the Centrepoint News Agencies. These are all places where you can buy a lottery pack for your mum, maybe for Mother's Day just coming up, where perhaps your grandmother or someone who loves scratchies goes along and lodges perhaps even a work lotto syndicate set of numbers, all part of what Australians do. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, official lotteries and keno games have been a part of the Australian product landscape in gambling for a long time, and are well accepted and well understood by consumers. They know what they're getting, they know what they're buying, and they make a conscious decision. But in contrast, the betting services that we see that are relatively new and less understood are those that we see through the likes of Lottoland. They actually provide no benefits to the thousands of small business owners across Australia, those news agencies, and no benefits to our local communities, particularly in rural and regional areas like my own. Another issue with these forms of gambling is the light regulation that's imposed on these services. They can and do entice customers away from traditional lotteries, and this further impacts on the benefits to small businesses and the community more generally. Many Australians have voiced their concerns about these services. And one of the other concerns I have, there's more than 4,000 newsagents and lottery retailers Australia-wide, and they depend on the sales of actual, real, well-regulated lottery products, and those products can actually generate between 50 and sometimes 70% of their income. So we're not talking about a small proportion of their income stream. And, the viability of these businesses is really critical. And with the online structure, as we know, it's based overseas in Gibraltar, I understand. And so none of those state or territory taxes are paid here in Australia, unlike our real lotteries that contribute over $1.1 billion each year. And of course, we see so many news agencies who are part and parcel of that. I've received a number of petitions signed by people in my electorate and concerned about the impacts. I've got so many pages of petitions from people in my community who share the concerns. They actually want to be able to walk down to their local news agency and buy their tickets or get their scratchy, whatever they choose to do. And they want those businesses to still be there for them, particularly a lot of our senior cits. And they just love going and having that quiet little dabble each week often. And I even saw recently, I was at Centrepoint News Agency, and they've got I think it's a lucky Buddha with coins across him, and I saw the amount of people who were rubbing their lotto tickets across the Buddha because they wanted the luck that went with it. And of course that is what happens in a local small community news agency. Well, the government has listened to all of the people like those that have signed these petitions. They've listened very carefully. And the government, last year, Minister Fifield raised these concerns with the Minister for the Northern Territory, and which is so far the only jurisdiction to licence this form of lottery betting. The Northern Territory government has responded by introducing what is only a partial prohibition on this lottery betting. The implication of this is that the betting can't be offered on Australian lotteries. Now, this was a positive step, but the government believes stronger and more comprehensive action is required, which is what we see in this bill. And this bill, the Interactive Gambling Bill of 2018, will take decisive action. I can say to the news agencies that are watching and listening to this debate, those in my electorate in the southwest of Western Australia, the government is taking decisive action. And we understand your small business. And we will amend the Interactive Gambling Act of 2001 and prohibit the provision of lottery and keno betting services to Australians. Now, as I said previously, traditional lotteries are heavily regulated and pay a considerable amount of tax to all state and territories. For every lottery ticket sold in those news agencies and outlets, up to 28% is allocated to state and territory taxes, and that supports not only the regulatory oversight and government services, but 9% is actually paid to the agents for relevant sale costs and income requirements. That's the heart and soul of these small businesses, and that's what this bill is about as well. $1.1 billion in state and territory taxes estimated in 2016-17. And that's what's been and is at risk. Plus those small businesses that add so much to our small communities. Over $350 million is earned by those 4,000 news agencies and official lottery agencies, the official lottery agencies across Australia, from sales of an official lottery product. Something that you're buying a ticket, you're buying a product, you're buying a scratchy. And news agents, as we know, actually rely on this to run their businesses. This is a big part of their business. And the additional services, keno services that are offered in clubs and hotels actually also help support community services and sporting initiatives. And it can be, as we know with Lottery West in Western Australia, they support so many small community groups. The amount of times I go to an event and one of the sponsors you see on the sign or on the pamphlet or on the program or on the advertising material, Lottery West's logo. It means they've contributed. And how good that is and how important it is to so many groups and organisations. And in WA, Lottery West does support things such as supplies, lease costs, administration and operating costs, and travel and capital costs sometimes, depending on a project, all sorts of different projects. They want to make the community a better place. And it's the funding that comes out of people buying official lottery products that funds this for small communities. So any time this is diminished, the whole of our Australian communities suffer. And everyone in this place would be wanting to grow our communities and support our communities and know that when they buy that ticket, that's exactly what they're doing. That's exactly what they're doing. So in direct comparison, lottery and keno betting services contribute significantly less tax and only to one jurisdiction in Australia. They don't pay commissions to small businesses at all. They are domiciled in overseas tax havens and minimise their exposure to domestic regulation. It's a deliberate decision. I understand that Lottoland has 650,000 Australian customers. So this is having a direct impact on each of our small businesses, our news agencies. And Lottoland doesn't actually sell you a ticket. You're betting on the outcome. So this really is important. Australian-based lotteries this will have an impact, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it certainly has an impact on small businesses. So this legislation is really important. Lottery betting services aren't required to comply with the guaranteed prize pool model. Instead, their major prizes are covered by insurance policies. And that allows lottery betting service providers to offer bigger prizes more frequently, which further impacts on the the financial benefits of traditional lotteries. And those bigger prizes are used to entice new gamblers. They actually aren't always aware of the difference between the two types of lottery products. And they're not even aware of the protections and the benefits to the community provided by the products that are offered through the news agencies and official outlets. So this Act will minimise the scope of problem gambling in Australia as well by limiting the types of interactive gambling services to Australians. Lottery betting services allow customers to bet on the outcome of up to 25 lottery draws being conducted around the world each week, with the promise of massive jackpots and all sorts of ranging from hundreds of millions, and that also can lead to even more problem and at-risk gambling. So this bill will prohibit the provision of lottery and keno betting services to customers physically present in Australia. It will also prohibit the betting on a contingency that may or may not happen in the course of the conduct of a lottery to ensure that bets cannot be accepted on the outcome or any aspect of a lottery or keno draw. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Commonwealth is responsible for online gambling matters and is best placed to implement a national position in relation to lottery betting service in Australia. And nationally consistent laws in this area are important, and the government has really responded to the concerns of the community and has acted accordingly. These amendments will also enable ACMA, the Australian Communications and Media Authority, to enforce compliance, and respond to any complaints about lottery betting services being provided by other Australian or international operators, and as well. Mr Deputy Speaker, the government recently expanded ACMA's powers to take stronger action against the provision of illegal interactive gambling services to Australians. Many Australians enjoy lotteries and keno as a recreational activity. And if you go to a lot of clubs around the country and you see the screens, you go to news agencies, you see the scratchies and lotto signs. The government is absolutely committed to ensuring that online gambling takes place under a robust legislative framework with very strong consumer protections and within the boundaries of community standards. But mostly as well, Mr Deputy Speaker, as I said when I started, I am always pleased to stand in this place and support Australian small businesses. They employ nearly half of Australians. Often those same news agencies give young people their first job, and often they also give people at a mature stage of their life potentially their last job as well. And as small businesses, They are critical to the Australian economy. They're critical to our small communities, and I am always going to stand up for small business, as this government does in this country. I commend this bill to the House.
I thank the honourable member for Forrest.